if all the gameplay is about the fan service and about the girls that you need to collect, like...
No, I think you should shut up because you don't know what you're talking about.
I know, I'm a fraud.
I don't want any milk, I don't want these boobs!
This is not the game for you. Go play lads.
I wouldn't play that.
Right, like I do like my morally gray men who are mostly probably red flags, but you know, there's like a green flag that's like really important to them that they hold on to.
Twisted Wonderland, Token Nambu, Ensemble Stars, Hypnosis Mike, Permissive Wizard, Alias Rising Heroes, Idolish, Ikemen Sengoku.
You're not the target audience for this game. Get with it or get lost, basically. I wanted to start this conversation about men off with women, actually. A particular woman. So one of the things with Wuthering Waves in particular that kind of caught my attention and in some ways was a catalyst to this conversation, one of the things anyway, was in the 2.0 update, amazing update, huge update, and very much a revitalization for the game as a whole. There's a character that many people I'm sure are familiar with by the name of Zhezhi. Now, why is Zhezhi so important to this conversation? I recall before 2.0 came out, you know, there's certain people who were digging a little bit into the leaks and they may have heard a couple of the characters' voices, right? And Zhezhi's voice in particular, there were quite a few people who were basically rating her voice relatively low. Like if you were to say Carlotta was a 10 out of 10, Zhezhi was like somewhere in the 7 to 7.5. And so, you know, I usually try to, you know, take people's word for, you know, a grain of salt, basically. I was like, let me listen to it for myself. After listening to it, I was blown away at how wrong they were. Like, genuinely, it's one of the best voices of the cast. And that's a lot. Like, a lot of the voices were really good. But I would, personally at least, I'd put hers, honestly, probably right beside Carlotta, depending on your tastes, right? Maybe you give it a 10 out of 10 or a 9.5 out of 10 in the event that you're giving Carlotta a 10 out of 10. I was just blown away. I could listen to it all day. And so I was so confused at first, but then I thought, took a second to think about it. I was like, why did so many people dislike Zhezhi's voice at first? And I kind of came to a conclusion that a lot of the reasons, not all of it, but a lot of the reasons were just because it was very different, I think, from what a lot of people were expecting. I think a lot of people were probably expecting a more quote unquote mommy voice, kind of like, you know, a Kafka from Star Rail or maybe like a Lisa from Genshin. I think that's what people were expecting. And then when they got something that was different, like wholly different, still good, but different, it kind of probably threw them for a loop. But I saw a lot of people like gravitating toward it. And just to be honest, the voice acting in 2.0 was just good all across the board. Like I know some people who were like JP only who actually switched to English because they just heard it was so good. And it had that, basically something that you don't really get when you're listening to JP only, which is those accents, because it's, for whatever reason, probably a little bit more difficult, perhaps, for, I mean, realistically speaking, if you're a native Japanese speaker versus getting somebody who's actually from the region, you know, Spain, Italy, so forth, so on. Yeah, so basically, the concept of something being different not always meaning it's bad. And I think a lot of people have some things that they're used to in this space right now. And when something different happens, they oftentimes end up being a little bit averse to it. Might have, you know, like some preconceived notions or unrealized bias against. And so the reason why that kind of, you could probably see now where we're getting to right now with the conversation around men in gacha. And how just because, you know, some people might want more men in a game doesn't necessarily always mean that that's a bad thing, just because it's not what others might be used to. So one of the common arguments against male characters being implemented more in certain games is target audience. They'll say, you know, this is not the game for you, go play lads, or go play Honkai Star Rail, or something like that. And I think one of the things that Kuro did at the beginning, and not even just at the beginning, mind you, but even in the game Punishing Gray Raven, they've kind of created a space especially with the game's launch, where the roster had a significant amount of men in it, comparatively. And so a lot of people were kind of going into Wuthering Waves thinking like, oh, okay, this is going to be similar to Genshin or Star Rail in that there's like a decent ratio, maybe like a 1-to-3 ratio or something at least, of males.
I calculated it was 5-3, 5 females to 3 males.
Okay. So,
Yep.
Which is basically, 5-3. 5.
There were 10 females and 6 males at the time of launch of 1.0.
Yeah, so 3-5 then.
I did the ratios wrong. I was thinking females to male, but yeah, okay, 3-5. Actually, it's the same thing.
But yeah, so basically, that's kind of been one of the common arguments to say, the target, this game, you aren't the target audience. I've seen that as kind of like a de facto go-to whenever there are people in a similar space with differing opinions, basically. They'll just pull out you're not the target audience for this game, so either get with it or get lost, basically, because they themselves are the arbiter for who this game is intended for and who it's not intended for. And so with that being the case, let's hear from our good friend Ryyuku Sensi. What do you have to say about that kind of argument? Do you have any words on that?
Yeah, it does depend, not specifically on gacha games as a whole, because I do not feel like gacha games as a whole are predominantly male-oriented, like, in the sense of like, when people think, gacha games are for males, they think like ratios of like, say, 80%, 90% of gacha game players are male, and that does not play out. Like, the numbers that we've found do not support that theory as well. Using the biggest game out there in this gacha space being Genshin Impact, the most recent numbers we found that have had a survey of that showed that there was a 55% male player base compared to 45% male base. So there is a majority, but it's not a significant majority. It's about 10% difference there. So it's a lot more close to 50-50 than people would otherwise believe. But again, I do understand the argument of like, oh, this is not the game for you, go to another game. But I think what them using it in the case of Wuthering Waves is a bit like misguided, because if you were using it in the case of, say, a game such as Goddess of Victory Nikkei, you're saying, okay, if you go to that game, you think, why aren't there any male characters in here? Why can't I play as male character? And that's not the game. That game was always set up from the very get-go as being fully female cast of characters that you can collect for, and that's as a premiere as well. Like, again, if that's what the game sets itself up from the get-go, like, this is what we are and this is what we're going for. Sure. Same thing for lads as well. If I want to play lads, I'm thinking, why can't I talk to a really hot woman? Why is it all these men? Again, that's not the demographic. That's what the game set out for in the beginning. But with Wuthering Waves,
when I was streaming lads, a lot of people in the chat were asking like, why can't I create main character as a male? Like, I was like, bruh.
It's a different game. Yeah. I mean, it's the same thing as well with Wuthering Waves. When the Wuthering Waves 1.0 was released, it had a ratio, it had 10 females to 6 males. And one thing I remember very, very vividly before Wuthering Waves came out, because I remember seeing a lot of CCs saying one of the great things about Wuthering Waves was the large cast of male characters and the designs of the male characters. I remember that very, very specifically. And now, the same thing, I'm pretty sure like Tectone, like a bunch of, like everyone else, they all said it as well. And now when we bring up the, it seems like there's a severe disparity of like, there's not enough male characters. They're just like, I don't want any male characters, I don't want these boobs. I'm like, dude, you were literally the one people that are saying that you liked the amount of male characters. Like, what's going on here? I think some people are just thinking with their smaller head than their actually bigger one. So when it comes to this conversation, it's really odd because Kura Games, another argument is like, well, that's just not the game that Kura Games wants to make. I'm like, no, we actually know what kind of game Kura Games wanted to originally make, because we have the technical test, the CPT-1, and then obviously eventually the CPT-2. We saw the games that they wanted to create in the technical test and CPT-1. There was a significant larger prominence of male characters in that story, but it was a certain demographic, namely the demographic from China, that were very, very vocal. And when people say gacha gamers don't want to play with male characters, I don't think that's true. I think it's just China more specifically, which is really odd because the biggest spenders for Love and Deep Space are from China. So it's this weird paradox of demographics here. But when it comes to that, there was an outcry from Chinese players, from what I understand, that said, no, we don't want these male characters. Give us more power fantasy, OP protagonist, and then Kura Games bent to that. Now, but should they continue with that? And as they have done with PGR, because they had the biggest spenders for PGR is also the CN player base, and there's ones because they spend the most and because they play the most. That's why they cater to that CN audience, not to the gacha audience. With Kura Games right now, the biggest spenders for Wuthering Waves are the JP audience. Japan is the biggest spender for Wuthering Waves, closely followed by Korea, in fact. And I'm not sure, I can't speak for Korea, but from what I've seen for JP, they are very often crying for more female characters. Whenever I see the biggest problems that JP has with Wuthering Waves as it is right now, the first one is, of course, the beginning story, Acts 1 through 3 to be more specific. But the second one, very close second, is the lack of male characters. Japanese players love male characters. Did I? Sorry, what did I say?
For female
You
characters.
said female.
They're crying out for male characters.
Sorry, I do apologize. My mistake. They're crying out for male characters. Let me just. I don't know why I said that, but they're crying out for.
Actually, with the whole
Yeah.
shonen protagonist
Yeah.
being the thing coming out of Japan.
And I'm sorry for filibustering this conversation because this is something that I'm actually interested in making a video on this myself. The thing is, when people talk about the gacha sphere of things, like all these gacha games, it's just like all these beautiful women, it's just all women. That's just because you don't know, like, a fraction of all the gacha games, with the biggest spenders of these gacha games being in Japan. I've got a list right here of at least about a dozen other gacha games that sell more than Love and Deep Space, a lot more than Love and Deep Space, and they have nothing but male characters in there. If you just want to go through a quick list here, I can go Twisted Wonderland, Token Nambu. You guys probably don't know Token Nambu. That's massive over here in Japan. Ensemble Stars, that literally has done 2.5 times the amount of revenue as Love and Deep Space already. Hypnosis Mike, Promissive Wizard, Alias Rising Heroes, Idolish, Ikemen Sengoku. All these games are selling incredibly well, and they have nothing but male characters, and they're all gacha games with different types of games. They're not all ultimate games either, like rhythm games.
Oh, it's not. I don't think it's
talking about
all male, but I'm pretty sure.
I think there are a significant male, but I think there are some females in there, like Android 18 and other things. But these games I just listed. Yeah, but these games I just listed off are all male, everything, every character in here entirely male, and they are making bank. And a lot of these games here, they just don't have English releases. So the other players outside of Japan, they're just like, well, of course they don't exist. No, they do. There's a massive market for it. You just don't know about it. And so the money is in male characters just as much as female characters. You just don't know. So everyone that says, "Oh, the gacha games is just for the male players. No one wants male characters." I'm like, no, I think you should shut up because you don't know what you're talking about. And that's my filibuster over.
Exactly.
Hey, you. Do the thing.